The rain drummed against the windows with a ceaseless, melancholic rhythm, as though the heavens themselves were mourning alongside her. The city outside blurred into streaks of gray, indistinct and uncaring, as Margaret Alden sat in the middle of her quiet, lifeless home. It was a modest place, a two-story brick house with creaky wooden floors and the scent of old books and lavender still hanging faintly in the air. But now, it felt cavernous, echoing with memories that stabbed sharper than any knife. She sat in Daniel's room, her hands trembling as they traced the edges of his favorite toy, a stuffed bear with one ear nearly torn off from years of love and mischief. The little creature sagged in her hands, limp and lifeless, much like her own heart. On the walls, bright with faded wallpaper patterned in little stars and moons, hung Daniel's drawings. Colorful crayon sketches of superheroes, animals, and scribbled hearts with the word mommy in childish script. His laughter had once filled these walls, bubbling like a brook through the house, but now it was gone, snatched away in a moment that shattered her world. That night, the night of the accident, haunted her like a cruel ghost. She had been waiting at home, stirring a pot of soup on the stove, humming an old tune Daniel loved. He had promised he'd be back early from the school field trip. But when the doorbell rang, it wasn't his voice calling out, it was the somber faces of two police officers, their hats in their hands, their words heavy and slow, as if they feared to say them aloud. A drunk driver. A slick road. A heartbeat that faded before the ambulance arrived. Since then, Margaret hadn't known how to be. The neighbors came with casseroles and stiff hugs, but their pity felt thin, like tissue paper against the storm inside her. The pastor from St. Luke's visited, offering words of comfort and scripture, but even the familiar verses sounded hollow. Friends offered to sit with her, to talk, but what was there to say? How could anyone understand what it felt like to have your child ripped from your life and given away to the dark? The silence inside her home was so complete, it roared. Daniel's bed, still neatly made from the morning he'd left, stood like an altar. His schoolbooks remained stacked on the little desk by the window, open to the last page he'd been studying. His sneakers were by the door, laces tangled in the way they always were because he was always in a rush. Margaret couldn't bear to move them. She found herself drifting through the rooms like a ghost, touching his things as though they might suddenly breathe and move under her fingertips. In the kitchen, she still prepared his favorite breakfast out of habit, only to watch the eggs grow cold and untouched on the plate. At night, when the house grew dark and the weight of her solitude pressed in like a suffocating fog, she sat in his room with the lights dimmed, the window cracked just enough to let the night air in. She would rock back and forth in the old armchair by his bed, whispering his name over and over again like a prayer, Daniel. My sweet boy. My heart. And then, one morning, as she stood by the window watching the dawn break in pale streaks of pink and gold over the city skyline, a thin envelope slid through her mail slot. It sat there on the hallway floor, innocent and unassuming. Margaret, listless, picked it up without thinking. Her breath caught as she read the sender's name, the Regional Organ Donation Registry. Her knees nearly buckled as she tore it open. The words inside were simple, clinical even, but they shattered the last defenses she had built around her grief. We wish to inform you that your son's heart has been successfully transplanted into a young boy named Liam. His life has been saved because of your family's generosity during a time of loss. Thank you. Margaret pressed the paper to her chest, her sobs echoing in the silent house. Daniel's heart, her baby's heart, was still out there, beating. Somewhere in the world, a child was alive because of him. The revelation was a dagger and a bomb. It was hope tangled in sorrow, a flicker of purpose cutting through the fog of her despair. But it also raised an impossible question: who was this child? And what kind of life did he now lead with her son's heart beating inside him? She hurried to the bookshelf, pulling down a city directory. Her fingers, though clumsy with trembling, found the section she was looking for. Carter, Carter. Liam Carter, she murmured, her voice hoarse from disuse. And there it was. An address. A neighborhood she'd heard of, though she'd never been there. It was on the other side of the city, a rougher part of town where life pressed hard against its inhabitants, where hope was thin, and struggle was written in the lines of faces. She sat back down, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. Should she go? Would she be welcome? A battle raged inside her. Was she intruding? Or did she have a right, a need? To see the boy whose life was a silent testament to her son's sacrifice. Memories of Daniel flooded her mind. His laughter echoing down the hallway, the way he used to race her to the kitchen table in the mornings, his silly jokes about her cooking, his dreams of becoming a firefighter so he could save people. Save people. He had saved someone. Liam. Her hands tightened into fists on the table. This wasn't just about her grief. This was about honoring her son's final, selfless gift. She stood, her spine straightening as resolve hardened her grief into something almost fierce. If this child was out there, her child's heartbeat echoing within him, then she had to see him. Even if it meant stepping into a world far from her own. The sun was higher now, spilling gold onto the kitchen tiles. Margaret moved with purpose, her steps no longer shuffling but decisive. She would find Liam. She would see the boy her Daniel had saved. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a sliver of peace in the process. Margaret's breath quickened as her car turned onto the cracked, narrow street lined with battered row houses and sagging chain-link fences. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to her quiet, tree-lined suburb. Here, the houses leaned into each other like weary soldiers, their facades peeling, windows dark and shuttered. Children played in the street, their laughter sharp and hollow, echoing between buildings. A man in a threadbare jacket leaned against a lamppost, smoking and watching her with wary eyes. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. What am I doing here? But the beat of her heart, steady and insistent, whispered, Daniel's heart is here. She parked a few houses down from the address she had written down, her car's engine sputtering to silence. For a moment, she sat there, staring at the crumbling steps of the house where Liam Carter lived. The windows were cracked, one patched with duct tape. The front yard was a patch of dirt, scattered with broken toys and an overturned tricycle. With a trembling hand, she shut off the engine and stepped out of the car. The air smelled of diesel, old frying oil, and dust. She smoothed her skirt, straightened her coat, and walked up the path. Each step felt heavier than the last. As she raised her hand to knock, the door creaked open, revealing a small figure. A boy, pale and thin, his eyes wide and wary. Liam. His hair was tousled, his cheeks sallow, but his gaze was clear and piercing, and Margaret's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't Daniel, but there was something achingly familiar in the tilt of his chin, the hesitant curve of his lips. Hello, she said softly, her voice trembling. I'm looking for Liam Carter. The boy nodded, his gaze flickering over her, as though assessing her intentions. I'm Liam, he said quietly. A sharp voice cut through the moment. Liam. Who's at the door? A woman appeared behind him, her hair pinned messily atop her head, her face drawn and suspicious. She was thin to the point of frailty, her clothes hanging off her shoulders like ill-fitting drapes. Her eyes narrowed as she took in Margaret's neatly pressed coat, her polished shoes, the hesitation on her face. Who are you? The woman snapped. Margaret swallowed. I'm Margaret Alden. She hesitated, her voice catching. I received a letter from the hospital. About Liam. The woman's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed further. Oh, you're her. The donor family. Liam's eyes widened. He looked from Margaret to his mother, confusion clouding his features. Donor, he echoed. The woman scoffed. Yeah, well, thanks I guess. Saved us a lot of money on hospital bills. She reached out, pulling Liam behind her like a shield. But we're doing just fine, so you can go back to wherever you came from. Margaret's mouth opened, her heart twisting at the woman's harsh tone. I didn't come here to cause trouble, she said, her voice shaking. I just wanted to see him. To know he's all right. The woman's lips curled into a sneer. He's alive. That's all you need to know. She moved to shut the door, but Liam, his small voice trembling, said, wait. The woman froze, glaring down at him. What? Liam glanced up at Margaret, his eyes uncertain but shining with something she recognized, hope. Can she come in? Just for a minute? The woman sighed, rolling her eyes. Fine. But make it quick. I don't have all day. The door creaked open wider, and Margaret stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarettes. The living room was cluttered with mismatched furniture, a cracked TV in the corner, dishes piled high on a low coffee table. Margaret's heart broke as she looked around. This was the life her son's heart had come into, a world of struggle and neglect. Liam stood awkwardly in the center of the room, his thin arms crossed over his chest. He looked up at her, his voice soft. Did you pay for my surgery? Margaret's breath hitched. Yes. Liam's eyes widened, a flicker of realization dawning. Margaret nodded, her throat tight. Anne. I just wanted to meet you. To know how you are doing. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Then Liam stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you. For saving me. Before Margaret could respond, the woman's voice snapped from the doorway. All right, that's enough. She's seen him. Time for her to go. Margaret's hands trembled at her sides, but she nodded, her voice steady. Take care of him, she said softly. Please. The woman shrugged. Yeah. Margaret's gaze lingered on Liam for a heartbeat longer, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the shy gratitude in his eyes. Then she turned and walked back to her car, her steps slow, the weight of grief and something more, resolve, settling over her like a cloak. As she drove away, the neighborhood fading in her rearview mirror, Margaret whispered into the silence, I'll be back, Liam. I promise. The days after Margaret's first meeting with Liam were a haze of restless thoughts and whispered prayers. She tried to focus on work, but spreadsheets blurred and client calls droned into the background. At night, her dreams were filled with Liam's pale face, his wide, uncertain eyes, and the biting voice of his mother. She couldn't get the image out of her mind, a boy in a house of neglect, carrying her son's heart inside his frail chest. By the third day, she couldn't take it any longer. I have to go back, she whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel as she parked outside the Carter's house again. The same row of crumbling homes stood in silence, but today, Margaret felt different. There was determination humming beneath her ribs. She stepped out of the car and knocked on the door, louder this time. The wait stretched long enough for her heartbeat to feel like a drum roll. Finally, the door creaked open, and Liam peered out. His face lit up, not with joy exactly, but with recognition, a spark of familiarity that made Margaret's chest ache. Hi, Liam, she said softly, offering him a small smile. Hi, he whispered back, glancing over his shoulder. Is your mom home? He hesitated. She's sleeping. She gets mad if I wake her up. Margaret glanced past him into the dim interior, where the air hung heavy with stale smoke. The dishes from days ago were still piled on the table, and Liam's clothes hung off his thin frame like they hadn't been washed in a week. Would you like to come outside with me for a bit? She asked gently. I brought some cookies. Maybe we can sit on the porch and talk. Liam's eyes flickered with something. Hope, fear, a flicker of rebellion, and he nodded. Okay. They settled on the sagging front steps, Margaret pulling a small tin of homemade cookies from her bag. She offered one to Liam, who took it with hesitant fingers. He bit into it, crumbs falling onto his shirt, and for a moment, he looked like any child, content, savoring the simple sweetness. Margaret watched him, her throat tightening. "Do you like school?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. Liam shrugged. "It's okay. I don't have a lot of friends. They say I'm weird 'cause I was sick a lot." "I think you're very brave," Margaret said softly. "You've been through so much, and you're still here. That's something to be proud of." Liam's eyes widened, and a ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Thanks," he murmured. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound a distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. Finally, Liam spoke again, his voice so quiet it was almost lost in the breeze. "Why did you come back?" Margaret drew in a steadying breath. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. You're important to me, Liam. More than you know." His small hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Before Liam could respond, a harsh voice cut through the air like a whip. "Liam! What are you doing out here?" His mother appeared in the doorway, her hair disheveled, her eyes flashing with irritation. She spotted Margaret and sneered. "Oh, it's you again. Haven't you done enough? Coming around here like you're some kind of savior." Margaret stood, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I'm not trying to take him away. I just want to make sure he's cared for. He deserves better than this." The woman's face twisted with anger. "You think you're better than me? You think you can just waltz in here with your fancy cookies and your pity? We don't need you." Liam flinched, his shoulders hunching inward, but Margaret stood her ground. "You might not, but he does." For a moment, silence crackled between them like static. Then the woman spat at Margaret's feet. "Fine. If you care so much, take him. See how long you last with a sickly kid who's nothing but trouble. You'll be begging to bring him back." Margaret's breath caught. "Are you saying, I'm saying take him?" the woman snapped. "I don't have time to deal with his whining. Maybe you can fix him since you're so perfect." Liam's breath hitched, his small face going pale. "Mom." But she was already turning away, muttering under her breath about how she was better off without the burden. Margaret knelt, placing both hands on Liam's trembling shoulders. "Do you want to come with me?" she asked softly. "I can give you a safe home. Somewhere you can be loved and cared for. No more yelling. No more loneliness." Liam's wide eyes filled with tears, but he nodded, a small, fierce nod of yes. Margaret's heart soared and broke all at once. She stood, holding out her hand, and Liam's small fingers slipped into hers. As they walked down the path toward her car, Margaret glanced back once, seeing the woman watching from the doorway with a twisted smile. But she didn't care. This was her chance to give Daniel's heart a new home, not just in a medical sense, but in a place of real love. As the car door shut behind Liam and the engine hummed to life, Margaret whispered, "You're safe now, Liam. I've got you." And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the heavy burden of grief lift, just a little. The sun broke through the clouds in shafts of gold, pouring through the lace curtains of Margaret's sunlit kitchen. The scent of fresh bread wafted through the air, mingling with the soft hum of a radio playing an old gospel hymn. Margaret stood at the counter, kneading dough with practiced hands. Across the room, Liam sat at the worn wooden table, pencil in hand, his brows furrowed in concentration as he worked through his math homework. It had been 3 months since Margaret had brought him home. 3 months of homemade meals, warm baths, gentle words, and quiet reassurances whispered in the dead of night. His cheeks had filled out, his color had returned. He no longer flinched at loud noises, no longer shrank away from a gentle touch. But even as his body healed, a question lingered in the air between them: why? Liam set his pencil down, rubbing at his temple. "Margaret, can I ask you something?" Margaret glanced up, brushing flour from her hands. Of course, sweetheart. What is it? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table. Why did you take me in? Why do you care so much? Her heart squeezed painfully, but she forced a smile. Because you deserved better. Everyone deserves to be loved and cared for. But, Liam's voice trembled. It's more than that, isn't it? I hear you sometimes. At night. You cry. You say his name. Daniel. Margaret's hands froze, the dough forgotten beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, a wave of grief threatening to drown her. He was my son, she whispered. His name was Daniel. Liam's breath caught. Your son. What happened to him? She sat down across from him, her hands trembling as they rested on the table. Daniel was a beautiful boy. Kind. Full of life. He loved music, just like you. He had a smile that could light up a room. But, one day, there was an accident. And I lost him. Liam's throat worked as he swallowed. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I didn't know. She reached out, brushing a curl from his forehead. It's not your fault, sweetheart. She wrapped him tightly in her arms and let her tears fall freely. When he finally pulled back, his cheeks were wet, but his eyes were clear. Does that mean I'm like your son now? Margaret smiled, though her lips quivered. Yes, Liam. You're my son now. If you'll have me. He gave a small, fierce nod, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. They sat there for a long time, wrapped in the golden sunlight and each other's warmth, the weight of the truth settling over them like a shared mantle. But even as peace settled into Liam's fragile heart, a new question blossomed in his mind, a question he wasn't yet ready to ask. Who was I before Margaret? And what will they say when they find out the truth? Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden. Inside, a boy and a woman sat at a table, holding tight to the fragile, beautiful truth that had bound them together. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the knock came. A sharp, insistent rap against the weathered front door. Margaret froze where she stood, a basket of laundry balanced on her hip. Liam looked up from where he was sprawled on the living room rug, coloring. The knock came again. Harder this time. Margaret's heart leapt into her throat. Carefully, she set the laundry basket down and crossed to the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. On the porch stood a man and woman, Liam's biological parents. The man, thin and stoop-shouldered, had deep lines etched into his face and shadows under his eyes. The woman wore a faded coat, her lips pinched tight, her eyes darting nervously around. Margaret's heart sank. She recognized them from the hospital, from those fleeting, tense meetings after the transplant. The family who had abandoned Liam. Mrs. Alden, the man said stiffly. We've come for our son. Margaret's grip on the door tightened. He's not your son anymore, she said softly but firmly. You left him. You neglected him. The woman's face flushed. That's none of your business. Blood is blood. Margaret glanced over her shoulder. Liam stood in the hallway, his small face pale and anxious. He hugged his stuffed bear to his chest, trembling. Liam, Margaret said gently, stepping aside. Go to your room for a moment, sweetheart. But, please, she murmured. Just for a moment. He hesitated, then obeyed, disappearing down the hall. Margaret turned back to the couple, her voice trembling but clear. You don't get to walk away from him when it's convenient and then come back when it suits you. He's been through enough. The man's fists clenched. You're just a stranger. You have no legal right to him. Margaret's eyes flashed with quiet fury. I may not be his biological mother, but I've fed him, clothed him, comforted him when he cried, and held him through his nightmares. I've loved him when you didn't. The woman's voice rose, shrill with desperation. We didn't mean to leave him. We were overwhelmed. We thought he'd be fine with the doctors. But we've realized we made a mistake. We want him back. Margaret shook her head slowly. He's not a mistake. He's a child who deserves love and stability. You abandoned him when he needed you most. Now he has a home. He has a mother. The man's face twisted with frustration. You're nothing to him. A small voice echoed from the hallway. She's everything to me. They all turned. Liam stood there, his small frame shaking but his chin lifted bravely. Margaret is my mother. She's the one who loves me. You didn't even care if I was okay. The woman's lips trembled, but she said nothing. The man took a step forward, his voice harsh. Liam, come here. Now. Liam flinched but stood his ground. No, Margaret stepped between them protectively. He's made his choice. You can't force him. And if you try, I'll fight you with everything I have. I'll get the law involved if I have to. This is his home now. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. The man's face turned red, his fists trembling. The woman looked down, ashamed. Finally, with a defeated shake of his head, the man turned away. Come on, he muttered. The woman hesitated, her gaze lingering on Liam. I'm sorry, she whispered, but her voice was too soft, too late. They left, their footsteps echoing down the walkway. Margaret closed the door with a shuddering breath. She knelt down, gathering Liam into her arms. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, she whispered against his hair. You were so brave. Liam's voice was muffled against her shoulder. I was scared. I know, she murmured. But you stood up for yourself. You stood up for us. They stayed there, wrapped in each other's embrace, as the morning light streamed through the windows. A week passed since Liam's parents had darkened the doorstep, leaving behind more than just tension. They left Liam with questions, dangerous, painful questions, that festered in the quiet moments between Margaret's laughter and the stillness of the night. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised shades of indigo and rose, Liam sat by the window, hugging his knees to his chest. His eyes traced the fading light, his small shoulders heavy with unspoken thoughts. Margaret entered the room quietly, her steps soft against the creaking floorboards. She carried a tray with 2 mugs of cocoa, steam curling from their surfaces like whispered secrets. Hey, little man, she said softly, setting the tray down on the low table. Cocoa for my brave boy. Liam didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the window, where a single star winked into existence against the velvet sky. Margaret's heart clenched. She knelt beside him, her hand brushing his curls. What's on your mind, sweetheart? His voice came out in a whisper. Why did they leave me? Margaret closed her eyes briefly, the weight of his question settling deep in her chest. I don't know, she admitted softly. Sometimes people make choices they regret. Sometimes, they just don't know how to love the way they should. Liam finally turned to her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Was I not good enough? A tear slipped down Margaret's cheek. She gathered him into her arms, holding him close. Oh, Liam. You were more than enough. You are perfect just as you are. They didn't leave because of you. They left because of their own brokenness. He nestled against her shoulder, his small hands clutching her sweater. But, why me? Why did I get someone else's heart? Why did my real heart have to stop? Margaret drew a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. Do you remember the accident I told you about? The little boy who was in it? Liam nodded, his brow furrowing. That boy, he was my son, Daniel. Margaret's voice broke. When he passed, I was lost. But I made the decision to donate his organs, so that others could live. His heart, it found its way to you. Liam stiffened in her arms, pulling back just enough to search her tear-filled eyes. You mean? I have Daniel's heart. Margaret nodded, her lips quivering. Yes, my love. You carry a piece of him inside you. That's why, from the moment I met you, it felt like I already knew you. It's like he brought us together. Liam's breath hitched. The room seemed to tilt, the weight of the revelation crashing over him. He stood abruptly, pacing toward the fireplace. So. All this time, you weren't just taking care of me because I was alone. You were taking care of me because I had his heart. Margaret stood too, her voice steady despite the tears. I took care of you because you're you, Liam. Because you're a brave, kind, funny boy who lights up the world. But yes. I also felt a connection to you because of Daniel. And I'll be honest, I needed you as much as you needed me. Liam's hands trembled. He sank to the floor by the hearth, his voice cracking. It's like. I'm not just me. I'm him, too. Margaret knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You are you, Liam. You carry Daniel's heart, but that doesn't mean you aren't whole in yourself. It means you've been given a second chance. And Daniel's love is part of that chance. Liam's lips trembled. Does that mean you're my real mom? Margaret's throat tightened. She cupped his cheek, her thumb brushing away a tear. It means I love you as if you were my own. It means you are my son in every way that matters. You don't have to choose between what was and what is. You can hold both. For a long moment, they sat there in silence, the fire crackling softly, casting flickering shadows across the room. Liam's shoulders heaved with quiet sobs as Margaret held him, her own tears falling freely. When the storm of emotion had passed, Liam pulled back slightly, his voice small but certain. I want to be your son. Not just because of Daniel's heart. But because you make me feel safe and loved. You're my real mom. Margaret's breath caught, and a sob escaped her lips. She wrapped him tightly in her arms. And you're my real son. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, the two of them sat there, no longer just a boy with a borrowed heart and a grieving mother, but a family forged by love, sacrifice, and a bond stronger than blood. The air was crisp, the first hints of autumn painting the trees in gold and crimson. Liam stood at the edge of the old cemetery, staring at the weathered gravestone. His small hand trembled as he traced the engraved letters, Daniel Thomas Harper beloved son 1997 to 2007. Margaret stood a few paces behind, her breath misting in the cool air. She watched her boy, no, her son, in a quiet reverence, her heart swelling with pride and aching with love. Liam knelt before the grave, his voice soft but unwavering. Hi, Daniel. I'm Liam. I guess you already know that, since I have your heart. I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for saving me, even though you didn't know me. His voice cracked, but he pressed on. I hope I'm making you proud. I promise to live a life that honors you. Margaret's eyes glistened as she stepped forward, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. He'd be so proud of you, Liam. And so am I. They stood there for a while longer, letting the silence speak where words couldn't. Finally, as the wind whispered through the trees, they turned and walked back to the car. Days later, Margaret received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, shaky, and hesitant. She opened it carefully, her brow furrowing as she read, I'm sorry. I was wrong. We were wrong. Can we see him? Can we see Liam? Liam's biological parents. Her heart twisted with conflicting emotions, anger, protectiveness, but also a spark of compassion. She handed the letter to Liam, who read it quietly, his expression unreadable. Do you want to see them? Margaret asked softly. Liam hesitated. I think I do. But not because I miss them. I need to tell them I'm okay. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe downtown, quiet and tucked away. Liam sat beside Margaret, his back straight, his hands folded nervously in his lap. His biological parents entered hesitantly, their eyes darting around before settling on him. Liam, his mother whispered, her voice cracking. We're so sorry. We didn't know how to handle everything. We were scared. Liam's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. You left me. You left me when I needed you most. His father's head bowed. We were wrong. We thought we couldn't handle it. But seeing you now. Liam shook his head. You don't get to come back just because you regret it. I found a real family. Margaret is my mom now. She's the one who stayed. The one who loved me no matter what. Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she squeezed his hand, her heart bursting with pride. His mother sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. We're so sorry. We understand. Liam stood, his voice firm but kind. I forgive you. But I can't be your son again. I'm hers now. I'm happy. Months passed. The seasons shifted from autumn's gold to winter's hush, and eventually to spring's rebirth. Liam and Margaret thrived, their bond deepening with each passing day. One bright morning, Margaret found Liam in the kitchen, making pancakes. Flour dusted his nose, and he grinned up at her. Mom, can we visit the cemetery again? I want to tell Daniel about my soccer game. Her heart ached with love. Of course, sweetheart. They visited the grave often, bringing flowers and stories, their visits a celebration of life rather than a mourning of death. Years later, Liam, now a tall, strong young man with a warm smile, stood in front of a packed auditorium, delivering a speech at his high school graduation. He scanned the crowd, his eyes locking with Margaret's tearful gaze. There's one person I need to thank today, he said, his voice clear and steady. Someone who gave me not just a second chance at life, but a real family, real love, and real hope. My mom, Margaret Harper. She's the reason I'm here. She's the reason I believe in love that's stronger than blood. The audience erupted into applause, but Liam only saw Margaret, her hands pressed over her mouth, her eyes shining with pride. After the ceremony, he found her amidst the crowd, sweeping her into a fierce hug. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For saving me, for loving me, for being my real mom. Margaret held him tightly, her voice breaking with emotion. Thank you for being my son, Liam. For bringing Daniel back to me in a way I never imagined. For making my broken heart whole again. As they embraced under the soft glow of the setting sun, it was clear to everyone watching, this wasn't just a story of a mother and a boy. It was a story of love resurrected, of second chances, and of hearts, both borrowed and reclaimed, finding their true home. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.